Look who finally made it to family dinner, Dad said with a sly grin as I stepped into the dining room. How's that little online business of yours going? Still selling trinkets? I adjusted my modest dress, no need to flash the designer label, and slid into my usual spot at the far end of the table, the family disappointment corner. It's going well, I said, watching Mom fuss over her perfectly staged table setup, snapping mental notes for Instagram. #family dinner vibes. Well, won't pay the bills, Dad snapped, cutting into his steak. Your brother James is closing million-dollar deals. That's real work. James puffed up with pride. Actually, we're meeting investors next week for $2 million in expansion funding, I said with a smirk. You know, real money, not pocket change from a side hustle. If only they knew my side hustle had grown into a full-fledged venture capital firm managing over $500 million, and that James had been struggling for months to land a meeting with my investment board. Mom chimed in, setting her plate just so. James needs to borrow your old laptop. His crash, the one you said was useless. I raised an eyebrow. The same gaming laptop you insisted no serious professional would ever need? Just because you made a few lucky online sales doesn't make you a tech genius, James snapped. I need it for actual business, he argued. I pictured my 3 MacBook Pros, my private server farm, and the tech company I just acquired. Sure, it's in my old room. Mom perked up. Maybe I should turn your room into James's home office. He needs a proper space for work. Of course, I said, sipping water, thinking of my penthouse office overlooking the city, the very building where James would pitch to investors next week. My phone buzzed. Message from my investment director. Thompson Brothers meeting confirmed. They don't know you're the potential investor. Keep it anonymous. Absolutely, I replied. Let them sweat it out. When will you get a real job? Dad barked, noticing me texting. James started in the mailroom and worked his way up. That's how you build a business. James nodded. You can't call online sales a real business. We're talking serious investors. $2 million is just the starting point. I couldn't help smiling. $2 million. That's cute. Don't mock your brother, Mom warned. At least he has a proper office, not a laptop on the couch. If only they could see my office with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private elevator, and James's upcoming investor meeting, secretly with me. You know, James said, smirking. Maybe I'll let you sit in on the meeting. See how real business works. Dad beamed. Generous of you, son. She might learn something. Thanks, I murmured. But I already have plans that day. Let me guess, James laughed. Another craft fair? Or a social media seminar? Phone buzzed. Due diligence done on Thompson Brothers. Numbers risky, high chance of failure. I smiled. Keep the meeting. I want to see their pitch in person. I stood, declining Mom's dessert offer. I should get going, have some orders to pack. That's your problem, Dad called. No ambition. While your brother meets millionaire investors, you're playing shop online. Walking to my modest car, not the Bentley hidden at home, I thought about next week. About the look on James's face when he realized who the secret investor really was. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving them wrong yourself. It's letting them do it for you, in front of the perfect audience. The day of the investor meeting finally arrived. I settled into my private observation room, peering through the one-way glass as James and Dad fussed over their slides in the conference room. Exactly 30 minutes late, just as I had instructed my team. The mystery investor prefers to watch before stepping in, my assistant had warned them. James fidgeted with his tie, the same one he'd flaunted at Sunday dinner. A real businessman's tie, he'd said, sneering at my online shop hobby. Dad paced, rehearsing his speech about family business values, the same values they had used for years to dismiss my ventures. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. James is meeting his big investor. So proud. #proud mama. I smirked at the stack of files in my briefcase. Actual audit reports, credit histories, rejected loan applications, and the real financials behind Thompson Brothers. Miss Chun, my assistant's voice came over the intercom. They're getting impatient. Should we start? Give them 5 more minutes, I said, watching James sweat through his designer suit. Let them stew a little longer. Finally I rose, straightened my power suit, and grabbed my briefcase. Time to make an entrance. The conference room door swung open. I stepped in. The shock on their faces was priceless. James fumbled, dropping his presentation clicker. Sarah, Dad's voice cracked. Good morning, gentlemen, I said, taking the head of the table and spreading out their documents. Shall we go over your pitch? This isn't real, James stammered. Where's the actual investor? You're looking at her, I said, nodding toward my assistant as she handed out copies of Thompson Brothers' true financial statements, not the inflated versions they'd prepared. After reviewing these numbers, I do have some concerns, Dad muttered. Wait, this was supposed to be a meeting with Chin Capital's principal investor, James protested. I smiled. Chin Capital. Named after me. The very same online business you've been mocking for years. James's face flushed. You sell things online, he blurted. Actually, I built an e-commerce platform I sold for $40 million 3 years ago. That was the seed for Chin Capital. I tapped their statements. Meanwhile, Thompson Brothers seems to be hemorrhaging money on vanity projects and bloated salaries. Dad leaned forward. Sarah, we're family. Let's discuss this. Family. I raised an eyebrow. Like when you tried to convert my room into James's home office. Or mocked my business at every dinner. That was different. No, it wasn't. And neither is this. I opened my laptop, displaying their entire financial history. 12 investment firms have already passed on you. Your growth projections are fantasy. Your contracts are underperforming. You've been rejected before because of exactly these issues. James sank into his chair. How do you know all this? Because I do proper due diligence, I said, gathering my papers. That's how I built a successful investment firm, while you were buying ties, and calling yourself an entrepreneur. I placed the last file on the table. Chin Capital will pass on this opportunity. But I held up one final sheet. However, I am interested in acquiring your client list at fair market value. Dad's voice dropped. You want to buy us out? Your clients. Your company, frankly, has little value beyond that, I said, glancing over their numbers. Silence filled the room. James's tie had loosened. Dad's confidence had crumbled. Think it over this weekend, I said, heading for the door. And James, you can keep my old laptop. Consider it a little parting gift from your younger sister. Now playing in the big leagues. Sunday dinner the next week felt completely different. Mom wasn't arranging the table for Instagram. James wasn't boasting about deals. Dad wasn't delivering lectures about real business. I arrived on time wearing a standard outfit. A Prada suit worth more than their monthly mortgage. No need to hide anymore. How nice of you to join us, Mom said, her perfectly staged table nowhere in sight. We saved your usual seat, James stammered. Actually, I said, setting my designer bag on the table, I think I'll sit at the head tonight. After all, I'm now the family's primary breadwinner. James choked on his water. The buyout check for Thompson Brothers' client list was still waiting to be cashed. About that, Dad began cautiously. Princess, we should discuss my firm's investment decision. I pulled out my iPad displaying their real numbers. Or would you prefer to talk about the 3 years you spent inflating revenue figures? Mom gasped. James, you claimed the business was thriving, I said. It was, he protested. Just not anywhere that matters, I corrected, scrolling through 8 failed loans, 3 pending lawsuits, and a credit rating worse than a teenager's first card. We can explain, Dad started. No need. My forensic accounting team already did. I accepted the wine Mom offered, an expensive bottle usually reserved for James's celebrations. Though I do have one question, I continued. When you mocked my online business, did you ever actually look it up? Silence answered for them. One quick Google search would have revealed Chin Capital's investments in tech, real estate, and renewable energy. I smiled. Even that country club you love bragging about? I own it now. James sank further into his chair. Why didn't you tell us? Dad asked weakly. Tell you. I laughed. Like you told investors the truth about Thompson Brothers? Besides, watching you pitch to me in ignorance was highly educational. So what happens now? Mom asked quietly. Now, I said, pulling for envelopes from my bag. We discuss your futures. They took them with shaking hands. Mom opened hers first, her gasp filling the room. These are your options, I explained. Mom, you can continue your social media career. But now as part of my company's marketing team with proper oversight. Dad, your experience could be useful in our acquisitions department. Entry level, of course. And James? He slowly opened his envelope, face pale. A junior analyst position in our due diligence team. Clearly, you need a crash course in real financial analysis. And if we refuse? Dad asked. Then, I said, you'll have to explain to your country club friends why your memberships were revoked, and to your business contacts why you're no longer welcome in any property my company owns. I sipped my wine, mostly theirs. Mom dabbed at her eyes. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because success isn't about fancy ties, social media followers, or inflated egos. It's about hard work, integrity, and actually understanding business. I stood, gathering my things. You have until tomorrow to decide. And one more thing. They looked up at me, the same people who dismissed and mocked me for years. I'm keeping my old room, perfect for storing my awards and magazine covers. I turned toward the door. And James, that businessman look you love so much? Totally fake. Just like the rest of your act. The door closed on their stunned silence. In my car, this time the Bentley, I checked my phone. Another text from Mom. Please, can we talk about this as a family? I smiled, typing back, we are talking. In this family, I'm the CEO and you're all entry-level employees. Welcome to real business. Sometimes success isn't about proving yourself. It's about letting others realize the truth about their own.